Sylvie, you have the YouTube channel called NewEarth. You get a lot of views. You've had some videos with well, hundreds of thousands of views, and people obviously like what you're doing. And you're exploring prehistory, and you're shedding doubt on the belief that we're raised with, on the education that we have. So, in this interview with you, I want you to share with us your view of human history, how we are here now, and what is our past.
Hello, and thanks for inviting me, first of all, for this opportunity. In terms of overall view of the history, what we have heard in school for the last 200 years in terms of history is more or less correct. What comes afterwards for the following few hundred years, I would say is half correct. And then anything older than, let's say, 800 or 1000 years, I would say is 10% correct. Because we are given the wrong impression that we were gradually evolving, which is not based on the actual archaeological finds. We see all of a sudden advanced cultures appearing out from nowhere and often even disappearing in the same mysterious way. So it's not true that we are gradually evolving, nor that we are the crown jewel of all evolution, because as we all know, there are plenty of artifacts and historic sites that we can't replicate still, although we imagine ourselves to be those crown jewels. So what was it? What was actually happening before this 1000 years, if what we have heard in school is wrong? That is a big question. And unfortunately, I'm having the feeling that very few, even alternative researchers, are looking deep enough into this question. They have the tendency to try to modify this fraudulent history that we have heard in school, to alter it a little bit and to make some story that is slightly closer to the truth. But I am not satisfied with that. I have made many videos proving that that history is a total joke, and we should start from scratch to write the new history. So, a few days ago, I just came back from Italy. I saw much more than I would have expected, actually. It was a pleasant surprise for me, the full expedition. And now I can say with full confidence that one of those civilizations that have been appearing on and off on Earth for the period that we would count in thousands of years ago. We are not talking yet about millions. There was civilizations sprouting here and there. I don't think it was one like global civilization all the time, but one of these was definitely in the area of the greatest concentration of this type of ruins, which don't even have a common name, a keyword that I can call them. They're usually rock cut ruins. They're mostly concentrated in Turkey and the neighboring areas, but I also saw amazing concentration, maybe even rivaling that one of Turkey, in Italy. It was just unbelievable. As we drive on both sides of the street, people would use these ruins as garden sheds, parking garages. And officially they would be classified as Etruscan ruins, but their extent is just unbelievable. Of course, there are historic sites where those very same ruins are just fenced and you pay an extra fee, but you can just go in people's yards and see the same thing. And as you go in the nature reserves, now that's even better than the fenced historic sites or people's yards. It was just absolutely magical. The most amazing thing was the amount of ruins. Everywhere we walked, uh, almost all stones that were not covered by clay had some hewn sides, right angles, traces of chisel work. Absolutely, undoubtedly, these were ruins. Broken entire boulders turned over, and this is just everywhere. We went also in some nature reserves and also in areas that are just that belong to the forestry department for wood cutting. Everywhere, and all these rooms, whatever, some sort of premises, all cut in the rocks by thousands, probably even by millions. So the most overwhelming of everything was their sheer amount. And this absolutely very same style of ruins continues all the way from China to Spain and Portugal. This is like a belt where we find them all over, just unimaginable amount of them. People don't pay close attention to them because they look quite old, they're in poor condition. The walls would be not very presentably looking. they, and also, their existence is not denied. They're always they're always credited to some sort of primitive local tribe. And nobody looks at the bigger picture that we have an absolutely uniform style, absolutely matching architectural elements that repeat each other, at least in this belt. Probably I see some sites as far as Indonesia, even United States, where I see very similarly looking stuff. But they're not properly examined. I get very few pictures. I have not visited them in person. Also, I heard that in South America there are tons with them, but the people who saw them were just not interested because it's too old and they didn't even provide the footage. So probably outposts of this cultural civilization, or at least the older layers of it, could be even all over the world. But this belt from China to Spain is just full of them. And then what else very interesting I saw again in this expedition is that there are like layers of it. Some of them are very, very old, like broad streets, entire boulevards ending over sharp cliffs. This I saw a number of times. And while the older ruins, you barely see the walls, remains of them on the ground. Then the youngest layer of this very same rock cutting culture are called Etruscan and are hewn in this style that everybody would call Etruscan. And I don't know for what reason people don't notice that those same Etruscan tombs are also there in Turkey, in Greece, and other places, many other countries. So
you're attributing one civilization crossing from China to Europe in the same period of time, presumably.
No, there were different layers. Like the oldest ones definitely stretch from China to Spain. Now, but the younger layers that were probably even few hundred years old, because it is not sure that the Etruscan actually existed 2,000 years ago or more. As officially said, there are also other versions, including few hundred years ago. I don't know which one is correct, but the tool marks on many of them on the recent layers were very fresh, so it is possible. So the older layers, to answer your exact question, the older layers surely stretch at least in this belt from China to Portugal, while the younger layers, we don't see, for example, Etruscan style ruins in China. No, we see the younger layers, they are only from Jordan. In Petra, we also have them all the way to Spain.
Well,
We see them, and
Petra, for example, I think it's dated around 200 or 300 AD. Am I right? What I'm asking you really is if you could date the older civilization at least.
that is extremely tricky. We were like 12 people in the team. Some of us, we had a geologist, we had an even amateur archaeologist. I don't consider myself anything at all. We had art historian and just people without prejudices. And in terms of dating, this is like the biggest mystery for all of us. And I will tell you why. Like the oldest layers seem really very old. As I said, they're definitely pre-flood because they are heavily clogged with clay. I'm not talking about any cultural layers, just entire floors, entire stories of their rock cut dwellings are totally covered, clogged with clay. This I consider to be only pre-flood, and another reason for which I consider them pre-flood is the total lack of leftovers from all this absolutely heroic digging of I mean, can you imagine how much dug out material would be the leftovers of many thousands of grottos? This is unimaginable amount. Mountains, they're nowhere to be seen around. So I think they were also carried away by the waters of the Great Flood. So they are pre-flood for sure. And on the other side, they are mostly cut into soft varieties of rock, like tufa stone. This is a stone of solidified volcanic ash, and limestone, which at places also can get very soft. And even in these relatively soft varieties of stone, at places, the tool marks were as fresh as if they were cut like 50 years ago.
Can I just ask you to date the flood, because you've used that as a reference? Some things are pre-flood.
That's an excellent question. And I will tell you a very wise phrase from one of the participants in our expedition. He said, "Oh, yes, that's what I was afraid of. After coming here and seeing so many things, I will know much, much less." So, this is exactly what happened. I don't know if this was the global flood in the biblical sense, but definitely it was a flood that covered all of this region. We visited mostly the region called Etruscan in north of Rome. So over there has been definitely such a flood. When was that? I have no clue. In my Survivor series, I touched the topic that some people suspect that there was a great flood and great devastation even some 200 years ago. And they have, as surprising as it may sound, they have a very good reason to suggest that, because of all these buildings in neoclassical style, relatively modern buildings, which are covered with clay, again with clay, some 1 or 2 stories high. These are definitely not cultural layers, pure clay, and no trace in history of when or why this happened, but many traces that there is an attempt to cover this up. So how many great floods, which ones? Absolutely, I'm telling you, the more you see, the less you will know. That's my guarantee.
So presumably you have no faith in the carbon-14 dating, which is what most archaeologists quote and rely upon.
In terms of recent history and some of the later layers of this particular culture or civilization are definitely recent, carbon dating is anyway invalid by definition because it gives an inaccuracy of 2000 years. So, this is by official definition of this type of dating. It it's not that I have no faith in it, just for recent things, it's inapplicable. Now, it may have some value in terms of determining the older layers, although I don't see how, actually, because there is no artifact that we can definitely say this belonged to the older layers. It could always have belonged to some later civilization that reused. We are reusing these dwellings till date. I mean, I saw thousands of garages and stuff. So, um, in terms of the so to answer your exact question, in terms of the younger layers, carbon dating is inapplicable. In terms of the older layers, it could be applicable if we had any artifacts that belong to them. You cannot carbon date a rock. You need
Mhm.
some other type of material which we don't have, basically.
I see
The
I mean, it's no doubt a learning curve that you are on. I was just looking at a video of yours from 2 years ago. It's got 330,000 views. Cities built millions of years ago. But then you put on an annotation saying that you're no longer sure that they are millions of years old.
Yes, because my understanding is evolving so fast that I don't have time to redo all my old videos. I have so much new material that I have to resort to putting annotations and correcting myself to avoid such. Yes, this is happening. Unfortunately, there are things that I need to correct, and the way I do it is I put annotations on the older videos when I
Yeah, so,
find out that.
yes, sorry, I didn't mean to focus on that issue so much as what altered consciousness have you got regarding how old they are? Because you mentioned Michael Cremo, who is known for saying humans have been around for millions of years, but something has caused you to doubt that now. Is that right? He uses geological evidence, I believe, by showing how old the stones are. Yeah.
Yes, now geological dating. I really had an interview with Alexander Koltepin, a proper geologist. I mean, with degrees and titles, and he was, by the way, a member of this expedition to Italy. He came as well, and I made an interview that I published both in Russian and in English on my channel. And this was the main concern. This is why I invited him to speak to him. What is this geological dating based on? I'm telling you, it is based on ballooning. Definitely, because it appeared on the scene of science or so-called science some, let's say, 200 years ago, when all of a sudden they started. Before that, there was only relative dating, means they only knew which period came after which, but it was not attached to any particular date. But after they decided that certain sedimentary rocks on the bottom of the ocean they increase with 1/5 of a millimeter per 1,000 years, after that they made it absolute. And with this data of how many fractions of millimeters per 1,000 years these sediments add up to the rocks on the bottom ocean, this is their main way of geological dating. I beg your pardon, but who can measure? Who has been measuring for how many thousands of years this 1/5 of a millimeter? That this is absolute joke. Even if they, let's say, even if 200 years ago they started measuring, is this correct? still this will be very incorrect data because we have only 200 years to measure. And I doubt if anybody is doing it, because very few people doubt this geological dating. And the other pillar on which this geological dating is based is they calculate the time from the last pole shift, when the poles reversed, which is again absolutely misleading, because how do they know that when the poles shifted? Because when they shift the certain particles, they change this or that, and there is some truth to it, but that is only if you know when the last pole shift occurred. We don't know that for sure. It is based again on another fantasy or assumption. So I started doubting this geological dating when I saw what kind of jokes are they teaching people in school about the history that happened even a few hundred years ago. And then I started thinking, if they are telling jokes about a few hundred years ago, then how can they tell us what happened millions of years ago?
Let me, if I may, just get some more knowledge from you. To move the conversation over to what kind of people you think may have lived on the planet in previous times. Were they similar to us? I mean, I'm not so curious about the physical shape, although that would be interesting, but I mean to say their abilities. And also, a lot of these megalithic sites are huge, enormous. They move stones that weighed 1,000 tons in Lebanon, anyway. And so I wonder what powers and understanding you may attribute to them.
Well, the source of my understanding of what kind of people they were, these sources may not be approved by all your listeners. First, I will list the sources and then I will say why I think so. Uh, First of all, it's my own experience with other dimensions, because I lived almost 2 years in Peru. I didn't like that somebody will tell me how are the other dimensions, what is it to be there. I decided to explore them myself. So whatever wisdom I gained, because wisdom, it automatically, to my feeling and many other peoples who have been in touch with sacred plants and this type of things, it also automatically does include some awareness of the human race, which has given us a physical body for this lifetime. It some small fraction comes automatically. Also, over there, I gained a very practical understanding of ancient, we now call them myths and allegorical anecdotes, things like that. But actually, they're absolutely true and direct. They're describing the experiences of the people in the past, because they were venturing in their in the dimensions of their own self much more than us. And because we have become so blinded that we cannot do it anymore, we consider it fairy tale often. And so this is one of the source for my opinion. And the second source are these set books of Jane Roberts. I take them as pure truth. I take them also as the most truthful historical account that we have of our human history, although very short. He does not concentrate on history. And the proof that they are the truth is absolutely scientific. Absolutely scientific. These are the past life regression sessions that are happening by thousands every day. So along with other data that people usually go for healing and past emotions, but now and then historical data emerges. And this has been proven again and again to be very correct. I mean, people speaking languages that they didn't even know existed, things like that, dates. I will not go in this in detail, but all these people, they confirmed the knowledge given by Seth years before this era of the past regressions started, because that's not going on for a long time. It is relatively recent. Within the last few decades, it has become such a widespread phenomenon. Such small details about the other dimensions emerge, like the path of the souls that they travel after they die, and all this is confirming the set knowledge in such a small detail, and it's confirming each and everything he says, that scientifically I consider Set to be the only proven that source of true history that I know of. There could be others, maybe I haven't studied them. Or others are difficult to check because now they repeat the same thing. They could be also genuine channels, but now it is already out there, this information. So these are my sources. So based on this, what kind of people were those? Well, they were much more connected to their higher self, and their technology was often what we would call, in our words, magic. It was definitely based on sound to much larger extent than us. We also use sound in healing and all that, but not to such a great extent as they did. This is the most important thing, and I still see many people doing this mistake when they start thinking of an advanced civilization. They immediately associate it with UFOs or some very technical stuff. They somehow are under the impression that such elements must be present in a advanced society. I don't think they had to be present. I think they had much cleaner technology and technologies. Maybe not all of these civilizations that were sprouting here and there at different locations on Earth, and that were probably seeded by beings of human form or other beings that already had knowledge ready made. They were just teaching the cavemen, the simple people. I think that was mostly the situation. You know, I think we are given very misleading picture. Like, even I thought a few decades ago, it should have been a horrible experience to live, let's say, in the Middle Ages. You get sick, and then they tell us how they take your teeth out without anesthetic, and how many people die during this taking of teeth out. And can you imagine all the other sicknesses? what But I think it was much more different. In reality, actually, people were not getting that much sick because they were getting proper nutrition. They still had access to normal food, which very few of us have nowadays. And I mean, everybody can read testimonials of, for example, dental health. What happens of people with ruined teeth when they go on a raw diet and proper diet, organic stuff? They even repair their teeth that should have been irreparable, according to modern dentistry science. So I think people were much more healthy. And I will just quote Seth, what he says in terms of our modern medicine. He says, "You people nowadays call the shamans of the past primitive because they would sacrifice a chicken in their hut to cure somebody's sickness, but you instead go to hospitals and have your own organs sacrificed by cruel surgeries, although there is no need for it."
Very interesting. You know, if I may, sorry, I don't want to be rude, but if I could just bring you back, because you raised an issue, and I don't want to invalidate what you were pointing out. I'm sure the people are very healthy in tribal areas today, in a non-civilized environment, as we call it. But you mentioned that it's unlikely there were UFOs, etc. And a lot of these megalithic structures are actually aligned with the stars meticulously. Is that correct? That there was a great understanding of the celestial bodies.
Alignment with stars is one thing that I don't focus at all in my research because there are so many stars in the sky that if you take any house or anything, you can find some alignment.
Okay.
Even take my own house, I'm sure I can find lines connected with at least 100 stars.
There
I,
is
I'm not I'm not denying that there could be some truth in it.
right. Well,
I
we
personally
know
don't
no. I
follow.
mean, we know some. I think in Ireland and there are some megalithic sites that align perfectly with the winter solstice, or such things as that. So there's some awareness, consciousness of our solar system at least.
The only thing from this area of research that I take into account is that many of the older pyramids, for example, like some in China, which are not very well known, they're facing the old North Pole, which was maybe somewhere in Greenland. And there are it seems, structures all over the world on different continents that definitely face this old North Pole. I think this has some validity when we have a pyramid and one of its sides is
Mm-hmm.
facing the North Pole, and then we see that many other pyramids face another old North Pole. I think this has some meaning. Everything else I find somewhat difficult to confirm.
Okay.
It could be true.
Uh, Maybe as a sort of a form of signing off, you could tell us what you think might be your next video. What journey or exploration you might take next.
Um, what you saw about Italy was only the trailer.
Ah.
Now I plan to make the actual episodes, at least two, about the ruins
Uh-huh.
of. The first episode will be about the ruins, and the second one about the amazing streets. Officially, they are called Etruscan streets, but now on the screen you can see they're rock cut as well. They're very deep. Like this one is over 20 meters deep, and this goes on for kilometers and kilometers. This is again another absolutely amazing feat. I should say achievement. So the next two videos will be about this. And I want to make so many. I want to take interviews from ayahuasca shamans, from people who have been studying the Erdstelle in Germany and Austria. Erdstelle is a network of again underground tunnels and dwellings that are too small for normal people to fit in. They are also very much under the radar because we have not found any UFOs in them yet. But not too many people are aware that there are such unhuman looking things here in Europe. Some of them have read about the keyword is mystery underground tunnels stretching from England to Turkey. That you can find some information about, at least without any pictures, without any locations, very vague. Uh, so I mean, this is big. This is epic, actually, and it's definitely connected to these rock cut things that I have been seeing now in Spain and in Italy. In what way? In which layer? This is really a lot of work.
What led you in this direction in life? Were there any events or influences that caused you to take this path?
You mean researching history?
Yes.
A very good question. Maybe the answer will surprise you, but as with this shaman Sebastian that I was interviewing lately, I asked him the same thing. How did you? He is really an amazing shaman. He brought one person who was dead. He brought him back. That good he is. So I told him, "Are you like such a special person?" He told me I had to become a shaman because my teacher told me. So, in the same way as his teacher told him, you have to become a shaman and spread this, type of cleansing of emotions to the world. And he was surprised because he was not a shaman person, but he had to learn and become one, which is quite an amazing. And he became a very good shaman, amazing person. So, in the same way, I would have never thought that I would do this one day. Even a few years ago, I would absolutely consider laughable that I have qualifications for that. But I started doing it because people started asking me, just receiving really, really many letters from YouTube viewers who wanted more videos. And later on, after I was doing this, let's say for a year, I understood why my work, well, I don't think it's fantastic, but at least relatively good. Because I was not exposed to like a lot of mainstream historic education. And also because the main thing that I understand is that we have sunk so deep into ignorance about our history that the situation is so bad that even historians can barely help us. At this point, only shamans can help us because it was the shamans in the past who were the keepers of history, and they are the only ones who can recover it. This may sound a bit mystical, but we are developing like the idea of past life regressions. It is already happening a lot, and it is only question of time when all these regressionists will start collaborating and collecting all the data from their patients. And it is very, very easy when 10 people on different continents around the world provide an account of a given historic event that matches, and these people are absolutely unrelated, then I think we can consider that account of as relatively reliable. This is the way the true history will be revealed, and this is the main message I have. This is the method we have to use. Digging and expedition, this will only confirm it.
Sylvie, thank you for all the time you've given. The sound quality deteriorated just a little bit the last couple of minutes, but it's acceptable. I'm curious, you mentioned ayahuasca, and I know Graham Hancock became, you could almost say, obsessed with ayahuasca for some period of time. So maybe that's a big secret for a lot of us to follow. But shall we stop there? I think it's been about 35 minutes or so.
It is only up to you about Graham Hancock. I have done ayahuasca ceremonies with him personally, and it was from him that I heard about ayahuasca for the first time, and I will be grateful for my entire life that he told me about it.
Oh, so you met him and spoke to him?
Yeah, we were together in a retreat for 2 weeks or something like that. We did, I believe, 5 ayahuasca ceremonies together.
Was that
in a group?
Was that in Peru?
I'm not sure he's okay with publishing like more details.
No problem. No, sorry, I got over curious. Sylvie, thank you so much. It'll be up in some hours, an hour or two. I guess.
Thank you.
No, thank you.